Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. One of the things I learned early in recovery was that recovery from addiction was about more than just getting sober. It was about learning a new way to relate to and interact with the world and the people around me, and also learning a new way to behave, to think, so that I didn't create the kind of miserable situations and environments that contributed and enabled my addiction in the first place. And this has been incredibly important because most of, especially as I continue in recovery, most of the problems and the stressful situations that I encounter in life aren't related to alcohol or drugs, and the thought of using alcohol or drugs to deal with those situations doesn't really come up. I don't get cravings, at least not often enough to even remember the last time I had one. And when something bad happens, I typically don't think about, oh, it would be nice to have a drink to relieve this problem. Not saying that never happens, but it's not my typical response these days. And so learning how to do things differently has been a huge part of recovery. And one of the key components of that is learning to refocus energy away from myself and onto the world outside of me, rather than focusing everything inside and really living a self-driven life and operating on, as the big book of AA says, self-will run riot. And yesterday I had a great example of a success with this. I had been experiencing some really negative emotions around a particular situation in my life. And these were emotions of jealousy, of envy. My self-worth was being challenged, and it was really bothering me. And on top of that, it was a situation where I logically thought, you shouldn't be feeling this way. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't help the way my emotions were coming up. Now, I used to encounter these situations all the time, and it was easy to deal with them because I'd just go grab an 18-pack or go smoke a joint or take a pill, whatever, to help me create some new feelings that would then allow me to escape from the ones that I wasn't enjoying as much. But these days, I have to figure out, how do I deal with these kinds of emotions when they come up, especially when consciously I know that it doesn't make sense for me to feel this way, and that I need to do some kind of work to cope with the way I'm feeling. So in this particular situation, one of the things that I was told early on, which was a hard pill for me to swallow, because I definitely consider myself an agnostic in terms of my belief about what we can and can't know as human beings. And it could be argued that I'm still an atheist, even though I have a higher power in my AA program. And so I was told early on about the power of prayer and how important prayer is to a program of recovery, especially if you work in a 12-step program of recovery. So as a potential, I guess, atheist and agnostic, depending on how you define those things, learning to pray was really weird for me. But I took people's advice, because that was also another thing I was told is, look, if you really want to get better, if you really want to start living life to the fullest, you just need to listen to other people for once. And that was something I never did. So I went ahead and did that. People told me I needed to pray, and that when I encountered difficulties, I needed to pray. So I added prayer to my toolkit of recovery tools and have used it on a daily basis. I pray twice a day, but I'm not the kind of person that prays regularly throughout the day. Yesterday, however, when I was really feeling these emotions, I stopped for a second and I prayed. And I didn't pray, it didn't seem like a traditional prayer to me. It was just as if I was talking to a friend. And I said, look, here's how I feel. And here's why these feelings don't make sense to me. And then I got the idea of, well, what I need to do is figure out, what do I really want in this situation? And it turned out that what I really wanted was completely opposite of what I had been thinking. And that realization, as soon as I had it, these feelings started to fade away. And that was a cognitive tactic that came about from using prayer that allowed me to cope with and then move past these feelings that really I couldn't get rid of, even though logically I knew that they didn't make any sense. So the reason I bring this up is that it is so important as we move through recovery to build up our toolkits about how we deal with challenges in life, whether it's negative emotions that we have, illogical or intrusive thinking, and then things that we have no control over, deaths in the family, stress at work, stress at home, and even the good things. How do we deal with, I was talking to someone the other day who said, man, life is being too good to me and it's making me really nervous. And I identify with that because we're not used to that as people who are in recovery, as people who came from a world of addiction. We're not used to life constantly being good. We're used to running from life because we don't like what it has to offer us. So the tools that I use in recovery and the tools that I've learned to use, they really are such an important part of my day-to-day existence. And it's become much more, recovery has become much more than just how do I live without alcohol and drugs, and is turned into more of a, how do I live well? How do I live well? If I had to sum it up, I would say that's really what recovery's become for me. How do I live well? And it's living well to me is about doing good for the world, doing good for the people around me, and then making sure that the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm behaving is aligned with the values that I hold important in life. And if I behave in a way that isn't aligned with those, taking some time to, and using the tools that I have to try to figure out what's going on and then realign myself. And that's it. When I consider things like that, I can't help but feel so grateful that I found recovery. And in fact, I can't help but be grateful for my addiction, because without it, I might have never realized that this was a life so full of potential riches if you just approached it in this way. And if you just looked at it in terms of what can I give to the world and what can I do to make myself a better person. And that's really been a huge blessing for me. So I wanted to share this morning because what I read in the book I'm reading really didn't inspire anything that I wanted to talk about, but what I experienced yesterday did. And that about face where I was able to take an emotion that was so strong and use a tool, in this case prayer, use a tool from my recovery toolkit to handle that in a way I never could have dreamed of in my addiction. It was just such a great example of a recovery program at work and how life improves so dramatically when you're working a program and really trying to live better than you did before. That's it for today. Have a good one. I'll be back here tomorrow with more.